The studio went silent for a moment as Judy sang into the microphone. She couldn't stand up, so she sang from her chair. Her voice, which had once been a national treasure, was now raspy and breaking in places because of the muscle relaxants and dry throat. But in that brokenness, the emotion surged stronger than ever. She sang as if pouring out her last drop of life. She closed her eyes and kept one hand on the armrest for balance. Drugs could paralyze the body, but they couldn't kill her desire to be an artist. But when the last note rang out, Judy felt like a puppet with its strings cut. The amphetamines had worn off, and her nervous system had given out. She gasped for air, and her thick mascara smudged. The audience gave a cheer. They gave her a standing ovation and tears, but they didn't know they were seeing her say goodbye. On TV, she was still a legend, but in real life, Judy Garland was so drunk that she couldn't walk backstage on her own. When the signal light went off, 2 assistants had to rush out, one on each side, to help her walk. She mumbled nonsense as her feet dragged on the shiny floor. She made it through the interview, but she was completely physically and mentally worn out. Less than a year later, in June 1969, bad news came from London. Judy Garland had died in a bathroom from an accidental overdose of barbiturates. People called it an accident, the unintentional act of someone who was too dependent on pills to find sleep. But anyone who saw her on Johnny Carson knew that death had been waiting for her for a long time. The audience saw affection, but Johnny felt panic. Her hand was cold and wet with sweat, and her fingers were gripping so tightly it hurt him. It was the grip of someone afraid of falling and breaking in front of millions of people. As soon as Judy sat down, the chemical chaos started to show. The amphetamines made her speak quickly and frantically, with words sometimes slurring together and dancing around in her head. She told stories, laughed loudly, and moved her body all the time. The energy she gave off wasn't natural excitement, it was manic energy. But every so often, the barbiters and downers pulled her back. In the middle of a funny story, her eyes would glaze over, going blank for a split second. She blinked slowly and looked at Johnny with the look of a child who had lost her mother. She lost her temper and the room was silent for a heartbreaking second. She tried to hide it by laughing, but her face was deeply scarred from pain. Johnny Carson led her gently, like a longtime friend would. He didn't ask hard questions and helped her work through her memories. He knew Judy was high, but he also knew she was in pain. She looked at him with her famous big round eyes now covered in a milky film of drugs and alcohol, and whispered, "Johnny, do they still love me?" That question wasn't in the script. It was the cry of a star who spent her life making other people happy but was completely alone. Johnny patted her hand to make her feel better. He could feel the shaking going from her hand to her shoulder and up to her jaw, which was clenched tight to keep her teeth from chattering. Bert dragged his feet into the shadows of the backstage, leaving the brilliant aura behind. On TV, he was still a funny legend. But in the darkness of the NBC hallway, he was just a slave to Hyan, a walking skeleton, shuffling his way home to continue his solitary war with the monster named addiction that an occupational accident had birthed. Judy Garland, the haunted gaze of a legend. June 1968. The air in the Tonight Show's New York studio was thick, not with the early summer heat of Manhattan, but with the weight of the name about to be announced. When Johnny Carson with his familiar baritone introduced the legend of legends, Judy Garland, the entire auditorium seemed to hold its breath before erupting into applause that felt endless. But behind the velvet curtain, where the stage lights hadn't yet reached, a tragedy spanning 4 decades, was nearing its end. The petite woman standing there, trembling in a sparkling sequin dress, wasn't just the girl Dorothy who once took audiences to the magical land of Oz. She was a victim, a broken body worn down by an uneven battle with sedatives and stimulants that began when she was just a teenager. On the MGM lot. In the cramped waiting room, Judy Garland had undergone a brutal ritual just to stand upright. Her gaunt hands, veins blue and prominent, gripped the edge of the vanity. Beside the blush compact were 2 familiar bottles like toxic old friends, one containing amphetamines to wake her up, to pump artificial energy into her exhausted body, and one containing barbiturates to extinguish the fierce screaming in her head. Her entire life, Judy had lived on this chemical seesaw. The studio gave her pills when she was a child to make her work 18 hours a day. And now at 46, she couldn't live, couldn't sleep, couldn't even smile without them. Before stepping onto the stage, Judy dry swallowed a handful of mixed pills, hoping they would blend in time to create the Judy Garland the audience expected. Stepping into the lig. A black tidal wave that sucked him out of his mind. His vision became blurry, and he could see Johnny Carson's lips moving but not hear the sound clearly. "Bert, you seem to be into good shape lately, huh?" Johnny asked tactfully, trying to steer attention away from the guest's frighteningly gaunt appearance. That question triggered a latent panic in Bert's stalled brain. What is he asking? Where am I? He was high on 50 pills, which told him to close his eyes and go to sleep right away, but his movie star survival instinct kicked in, and he bared his teeth in a grin. His jaw still hurt, so the smile was crooked, but the audience thought it was a cute smirk. "Well, actually, I'm on the alien diet, Johnny," Bert said, his voice sounding funny but as weak and brittle as glass. He lied. He wasn't on a diet. He just couldn't eat because the city heat accident hurt his jaw so much that chewing and swallowing was painful, and the Halcyon had taken away all of his appetite. He was literally starving to death in front of millions of viewers, but he tried to hide it with bitter humor. Johnny laughed, but his eyes were still full of worry. He knew that looks drug addicts get when they stare blankly into the camera, where drug-induced hallucinations were dancing. When the show ended and the lights went out, Burt Reynolds fell to the ground. The mask of the rogue fell off, revealing the face of a seriously sick man. He couldn't stand up on his own, and a soft moan could be heard coming from his clenched teeth. The jaw pain returned as the drugs started to wear off, demanding a new dose. It was said in the tabloids that he had AIDS, which was the death sentence of that decade. But the truth was right there on the vanity table in an orange plastic pill bottle labeled Hyan. Bert stared at the bottle. Broken memories took him back to the set of City Heat, where a heavy metal chair had smashed his jaw during a failed stunt. The pain from the temporal mandibular joint wasn't just pain. It was a shrieking scream that would not stop for 24 hours a day, making it impossible to eat, sleep, or live like a human. To escape the bone-deep agony, he turned to Hyan, a very strong sleeping pill. At first, he only needed one to get a wink of sleep, but now he was taking 50 a day. That was enough to kill a horse, but for Bert it was just enough to stay in a drowsy state on the edge of life and death. He dry swallowed his handful of pills for the evening, feeling the bitter chemical taste slide down his throat, the only thing keeping him from collapsing from exhaustion. When the Tonight Show theme played, Bert stood up. He didn't walk. He floated. A side effect of high-dose Halcyon abuse is short-term memory loss and complete dissociation from reality. He walked onto the stage, applause raining down, but it sounded distant as if echoing from the bottom of a swimming pool. Johnny Carson stood up, his usual professional smile faltering for a split second when he saw the condition of his old friend. Bert had wasted away too quickly, losing over 30 pounds in just a few months. Transforming from a burly cowboy into a drifting ghost. Johnny extended his hand, and when Bert took it, he felt the uncontrollable tremors of a nervous system being poisoned by pharmaceuticals. Bert sat down, trying to cross his legs in his signature debonair style, but his joints cracked in protest. The Halls on High hit, not as a calm wave, but as a. The high point is when the audience laughs out loud. To a normal person, this would be a happy sound, but to someone whose nervous system is full of painkillers and alcohol, it turns into a piercing roar. Elizabeth flinches slightly, her violet eyes widening in a stare for a split second, revealing wild panic before she can calm down and put on her superstar mask again. This is when the addict inside her comes out, scared, paranoid, and lost in the crowd. The segment ends and the tally light goes off. Elizabeth relaxes her body, slumps into the chair like an empty sandbag. The drugs are draining her energy, and drowsiness comes in like a black wave. She rubs her eyes, making a dark streak on her mascara. "I need to go backstage," she whispers, her voice raspy and lacking any queenly air. Johnny nods, signaling an assistant. Elizabeth stands up, stumbling as she clutches the armrest. She isn't looking for water. She is looking for her purse. She knows there is one more dose inside. The show is over, but her body's thirst is just beginning. Under the glamorous lights, the audience witnessed a legend, but only the shadows backstage know the price of that legend is a soul imprisoned in a pharmaceutical coma with no exit. Burt Reynolds, the leading man in 50 sleeping pills. In the mid-80s, the NBC studios in Burbank were as dazzling and glamorous as ever, but the air in the VIP dressing room today was as cold as a crypt. The man sitting before the mirror was trembling as he buttoned his silk shirt, a simple task that took him 3 tries to complete. It was Burt Reynolds, America's #1 symbol of masculinity, the man who once possessed a smile that melted millions of hearts. But the reflection in the mirror now was a stranger. Sun-sunken cheeks revealing the skull beneath, hollow, soulless eyes, and a body so emaciated that his expensive suit hung loosely like it was. Her tongue is generally quick and sharp, but right now it feels like a block of lead. Liz opens her mouth to answer Johnny's question about her new movie, but the sound gets stuck in her throat. She has to fake a cute laugh as she reaches for the water glass on the desk. The crowd sees a beautiful move. Johnny sees a desperate attempt to lubricate voice cords that aren't working because of drugs. Johnny tells Liz, "You look beautiful lately." Lizzie blinks slowly and heavily as his eyes look deeply into hers. The line moves slowly through her mind. In her head, words float around randomly and don't make sense. She knows she needs to say something clever back, but the high whispers in her ear. Take it easy. Do not say anything. Just smile and sit there. She has to really bite her gum She wakes up from her dream in sharp pain. "Thank you, Johnny," she replies. Her voice sounding normal to the audience, but echoing like a buzz in her own ears. She hears her voice as if someone else is speaking. That dissociation makes her feel like a wooden puppet with the strings being pulled by the white pills dissolving in her stomach. At times, she leans forward, her gaze glossy and unfocused, drifting past Johnny's shoulder into the infinite void. She doesn't see the audience. She sees the flickering hallucinations of intoxication. Her hand unconsciously fiddles with her diamond ring, twisting it back and forth in a mechanical obsessive rhythm. It's the tick, the unconscious gesture of addicts when the nervous system is overstimulated, but the body is inhibited. Johnny Carson, with his veteran experience, skillfully steers the conversation, filling the deadly silences when Elizabeth suddenly forgets what she was saying mid-sentence. He becomes a reluctant babysitter, constantly juggling to keep this beautiful bomb from exploding or falling asleep live on air. This is a well-known recipe for a dangerous drink that she calls the Bee Breakfast of Champions. The only thing that kept her from giving up in pain and sadness. Screaming deep inside her. 5 minutes go by. The drugs start to work. She no longer feels like knives are cutting her back. Instead, she feels a sweet numbness that spreads from her neck to her toes. Her eyes get very small, which is a sign that she is using opioids. But because the studio lights are so bright, no one else sees her. When she looks at the world, it seems like she's looking through a cloudy fish tank. She leans her head back and smiles unconsciously with the corner of her mouth moving. The smile of someone who is floating in a fake state of happiness and has no connection to the hard realities of life. One of the helpers knocks. "It's time to go on air, Miss Taylor." It sounds like the voice is from another world. Elizabeth needs a few seconds to get her bearings, and it took all of her willpower to get her legs to stand up. Her muscles aren't making her walk. The drugs are moving her forward. The crowd goes wild with cheers when Johnny Carson calls her name. She comes out from behind the silk curtain. The audience thinks she is walking slowly and elegantly, but she is really walking on clouds because the drugs have taken away her sense of gravity. She can't feel her feet touching the ground, so every step is a risk because the drugs and alcohol are messing up her inner ear's balance mechanism. Johnny Carson, the old fox of TV, can smell the heavy smell of alcohol mixed with peppermint right away. As he helps her to the chair, he feels her weight sitting on his hand more than normal. Her hands are icy cold and wet with sweat, the kind of sweat that comes from having problems with the autonomic nervous system. The real fight starts inside the star's head as the conversation starts. Her mouth is very dry. Opioids often cause cotton mouth as a side effect. 11:30 p.m. A lot of families in the US turn off the lights and turn on the TV. The start of the entertainment hour is marked by the famous theme song of The Tonight Show. John Carson comes out, smart and funny, ready to greet guests who are the biggest stars in Hollywood. Take a better look. Those million-dollar smiles hide hands that are shaking, tucked under the legs in a smart way. Behind eyes that shine with feeling are pupils that are changing sizes or getting smaller than they should because of chemicals. They are great actors, beautiful people, and comedy stars. On the other hand, they are going on live TV while high on a mix of drugs including cocaine, heroin, pills, and alcohol. These kids aren't acting up. They are white. Getting tough. They use every bit of their survival urge to act like everyone else, even though their bodies are screaming in pain or withdrawal. Thank you for coming into the dark backstage area of The Tonight Show. These 8 stars were some of the worst addicts Johnny Carson ever had to host. Elizabeth Taylor, the drug cocktail that killed her. In Burbank's NBC Studio One, the spotlights are so hot that they melt the thick layer of powder on the actors' faces. Even so, Elizabeth Taylor is cold. A bone-chilling cold runs down her spine. It's not from the air conditioning, it's her body's way of telling her it needs to refuel. A movie star is shaking in a closed changing room, away from the loud crowd. The most important thing of the night is on the messy vanity, between the expensive cologne and the script for the show. A glass of vodka that has been watered down and a blister pack of pills that is only partly open. She doesn't drink water. She takes 2 dry pills of Percodan, which are strong opioid painkillers, and then drinks a lot of alcohol right after.